The journey through menopause can leave many women feeling like they've lost control of their emotional well-being. But there's a scientific explanation for what's happening. In today's episode, we are diving deep into the chemistry behind your midlife emotions, and more importantly, how to regain your sense of balance and control through proven and practical strategies. Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Townley, and I am thrilled to have my dear friend and colleague, Laini Gray, back on the show today. And together, we're going to be diving into a topic that affects millions of women, managing emotions during the menopausal transition. If you've been feeling like your emotional responses are more intense as you travel through perimenopause and menopause, or you're experiencing mood swings that seem to come out of nowhere, you're not alone. The hormonal landscape of midlife can feel like navigating uncharted territory, often leaving women feeling frustrated and confused about their emotional well-being. So in this episode, Laini and I are going to break down a little bit of the science behind why these emotional shifts happen and explore how hormonal changes affect your brain chemistry. And most importantly, share practical strategies that have helped both of us and our clients regain emotional equilibrium during the season of life. We're going to discuss everything from the role of estrogen in hormonal regulation to specific lifestyle practices that can help you to feel more grounded and in control. Whether you're in perimenopause, menopause, or simply want a better understanding of what lies ahead for you, this conversation will provide you with valuable insights and actionable steps for maintaining emotional balance. Hi, Laini.
Hey, Courtney, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Well, I'm happy to see we didn't dress the same today because that happens a lot.
Right? I do have a little black on, but you know.
Yeah, you do have a little black, yeah, but we definitely look like we're wearing different clothes, which is great. I'm so happy to be having this conversation because I feel like this is one of the main areas that I try to focus on in my work with my clients, because I feel like if we are not able to find emotional stability, changing behavior on any front gets really challenging. And so it's a really, really important cornerstone of behavior change. Not to mention, it just sucks to feel emotionally volatile all the time.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It makes you feel crazy. You don't know what's going on. It's not a fun place to be.
No. And I want to read, as always, a few stats because I think it's really important that women hear how not alone they are in this. And you and I are going to share some personal stories here too, which I think will help with that. But here's a few interesting tidbits of information. So research from the Study of Women's Health Across the Nation, which is SWAN, indicates that up to 70% of women report increased mood swings and irritability during perimenopause. There was a Harvard study that found that women entering perimenopause were twice as likely to experience clinical significant depressive symptoms. And the North American Menopause Society, which I believe now is just the Menopause Society, but they used to be known as the North American Menopause Society, reports that approximately 45% of perimenopausal women experience heightened anxiety symptoms. I can so relate to that one. We'll get into that in just a second. So I mentioned this to you before we hit record, but one of the frustrations that I have with this conversation is, like so much of health and well-being, we try to put all of our eggs in one basket. So when a woman is rumbling with her emotions at midlife, I feel like one of two things happen. A provider either tells her that she just needs to work on managing her brain, right? And working on her thoughts and maybe administering some better self-care. Or it's that the other end of the conversation where all the biochemistry is disrupted and it's a chemical thing and she has no control over it. And I don't think it's an either or conversation. I think it's very much a both and conversation. And this has
Definitely.
even frustrated me, I think, in my education, because I have done programs where it's like, no, it's just all thoughts, or no, it's just all chemistry. And it's like, no, can it be both? It feels like it's both.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's our whole integrative approach to, human health and in
Yeah.
women's health especially. It's really integrated. Nothing is individual. Nothing is just
No.
off on its own. Your mind is connected to your gut, is connected to your behaviors, is connected to your sleep, is connected to your nutrition.
Yeah.
So just thinking that one piece will solve everything is incorrect.
Yeah, 100%. So, of course, I knew you would be a great person to have this conversation with me. But again, as I've stressed so many times in our past conversations, I think that just us kind of pursuing different fields in the wellness industry makes us two people that are really good to bring together for this conversation,
Yeah.
because you tend to focus on the biochemistry and I tend to focus on the behavior change part.
Yeah.
And both matter. Both matter in terms of restoring our emotional stability. So, curious to know from the outset of this conversation, like, what have your kind of emotional challenges been as you have traveled through perimenopause and into menopause?
Well, that's a can of worms.
Yeah, right. I know. How much time do we
Where
have?
do
We
you
don't
want
have
to
that much
start?
long.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I would say, you know, entering my 40s, I felt pretty good, pretty confident. My work was good. My relationship was good. Everything was good. And I started to feel a little more anxious, maybe a little more depressed. And I didn't really know why.
Yeah.
Right. And then there were some shifts in my weight. So then that made me more depressed.
Yeah.
Right. So there was definitely something going on. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, because I thought I was doing all the right things. And then I started to notice a little more, maybe brain frog and
Brain frog.
brain frog. I think I have some of that today.
So perfect. Yeah.
Brain fog and irritability, and then just being angry, right? So my
Yeah.
emotions were kind of a little not acting normal. It didn't feel right.
Mhm.
So as I started to understand, oh, things are shifting and things are happening, I'm like, oh, I got to double down on eating well, trying to get my sleep and all of these things so I can manage this. So then, this is just life. This is life. And you talked about it today on one of your posts on Instagram. You feel like you kind of got it handled and then something happens. So in my case, we decided we were going to build a house. And in this, I had mom with chronic illness. We visited her in the hospital. She then passed away, which was hugely emotional. Navigating grief is really hard, no matter what age it is.
Right.
And as we're navigating grief, or mostly me navigating grief, we're trying to remodel a house, get all these things going, contractors, all this. And then I have a cecal volvulus. So my colon twisted and I ended up in the ER with emergency surgery. So now I'm recovering from a surgery. My mom has passed away and we're building a new house 3 hours from where we live.
So, what was the problem?
Nothing. Yeah, and I was having hot flashes. It was great, right?
Yeah.
So it was all of these things compounded at one time. And then we moved. So if you've moved, so all of these things happen. And so in midlife, things seem to, I don't even know how to describe it, but it seems worse sometimes, right? So there is that biochemical component, but there's a lifestyle component too. And how do you navigate that? So I'm excited we're going to talk about this today.
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting because I feel like I carried anger through my life, which tells me that it's more of a mindset thing. Like, I know the anger for me is very much a mindset thing, and it's been a rumble I've had my whole life. And what I really started to figure out is that I was using anger to not have to feel anything else. Because how convenient, right? Anger is a strong emotion. It repels kind of everything and everyone. And so it just really does a good job.
It does. It does.
If you want to be alone and miserable, I don't know. So that was like kind of an interesting insight that I didn't really have until midlife, but I can't say that it was because of my hormones. It was really, I think, just the way I was thinking about life, the way I was, the skills that I lacked to take care of my emotional landscape. And then I'm not to the other side of menopause yet. Like, I'm still very much in the throes of perimenopause. And I would say that the biggest things for me have been the anxiety is very new. I've never had anxiety in my life.
Yeah.
And I noticed that right before a bleed, right before a period, I just tend to get really worried about things in my life and my business that I'm generally not worried about.
Yeah.
So that's a whole new thing. And then also I would just say the reactivity. Because if I
Mhm.
don't sleep well,
Right.
if I'm just chemically not well taken care of for whatever reason, then I definitely find I get shorter with everyone around me. And I'm quicker to cry, I'm quicker to anger, I'm quicker for everything, all emotions.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say for me, those have been like the highlights. At least that's kind of what came to mind right before we hopped on this call. So let's start diving into kind of the
Mhm.
chemical side of emotions. So there is obviously chemistry shifting at midlife. And we've talked a lot, you and I, in
Yeah.
every conversation we've ever had about progesterone and estrogen and even testosterone starting to shift. And all of those have a impact on biochemistry.
Yes.
So can we open that can of worms and
Yeah,
just
let's do it.
kind
Let's
of
do
go
it.
down that road?
Yeah, so we've talked about this before. Those beautiful hormones, right? They ebb and flow throughout the month when we have a cycle, and they
Yeah.
actually affect our mood, our metabolism, all these things. So, as we're talking about mood and emotions today, estrogen really helps us feel positive, confident, happy. Let's go get it done. We feel really good about things. Progesterone keeps us calm and collected, right? So we have that coolness about us. Testosterone gives us some drive. Thyroid just makes everything better. And at midlife, all of that kind of shifts around, declines, fluctuates, does all kinds of things. And so we're left feeling not as confident, way more anxious about things we were never anxious about before,
Yeah.
not really motivated to do things, and then just feeling blah,
Yeah. And I
right? So
hear
it
that a
is,
lot at midlife,
yeah.
people just not having motivation.
Yeah, it's just, and it's kind of, it's a weird thing to describe because you're like, nothing's wrong, but I just feel blah,
Yeah.
right? Because most of us will think, no, I'm healthy, life is okay. Why am I not excited? So some women will say they just don't feel excited about life.
Yeah. And I was reading earlier today too about estrogen's effect on neurotransmitters like
Mhm.
serotonin and dopamine.
Yes.
So
Yes.
these are drivers, right, for us to go out and pursue things
Yeah.
and when we don't have those on board, we definitely feel more flat.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't have them on board, it's that we don't have them maybe in the quantities that we once did,
Yeah.
simply because it's not just the estrogen departing, but maybe speak a little bit to what estrogen does to our gut health because that's where a lot of like our
Mhm.
serotonin is created.
Yeah. Well, as you're speaking about this, it's like this recipe, right? So
Yeah.
neurotransmitters have all these things that combine together to build serotonin,
Yeah.
right? So we have our hormones, we have our amino acids, and then we have a healthy gut, and all of this makes us feel happy, right? So when estrogen leaves or fluctuates, we have disrupted gut health. Great. We have less estrogen in that serotonin cycle.
Yeah.
We feel a little bit depressed, so we're not eating well. So now we're not even getting the building blocks of neurotransmitters from our intake of protein and healthy foods, right?
Yeah.
So that's really a multifaceted piece. It's not just the estrogen. But what's interesting is our gut and our brain are connected. So we've heard it, it's the gut brain axis. People talk about it, they're talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
So what happens in the gut doesn't stay there, it actually goes right to your brain.
Yeah.
This is pretty powerful. So it travels up the vagus nerve. And when I first learned about this, in my mind, I visualize a highway where, it's an even exchange of information from the gut to the brain. Well,
Okay.
that's not true. That's not true. Did you know that, Courtney?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So upwards of 70 to 80% on that highway is gut to brain.
Oh, interesting.
Less than 10% is actually brain coming down to the gut.
Mhm.
Fascinating. So if you have chronic constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel, inflammation in your gut and stomach, and all of that, that is getting on that nervous system, traveling up to the brain, and now it's affecting what's happening in your brain.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about that, when you are constipated and feeling stuck, like you don't want to move,
Mhm.
what is your mood like?
Not good. I'm definitely not
No,
motivated.
right?
I'm
Well,
irritable, probably more than
right?
anything.
Totally. And on the other end of the spectrum, and if you're bloated and gassy, like think about how you feel. They're intricately related. So, yes, so estrogen, gut health, brain health, all related.
Yeah. And now we're calling the gut, well, at least I've heard it alluded to at the second brain, right?
Yeah,
It's
totally.
it's that powerful. And it is so interesting. The clients that I've worked with over the years, where I've seen it work both ways. I've had young clients actually who are incredibly like in college, first jobs, incredibly stressed to the point that they have gut disruption,
Yeah.
right? And then I've seen, of course, a lot of the fallout that happens at midlife where women they don't have the microbiome they once did. They have dysbiosis. They're more constipated than they've ever been. And then, of course, that's affecting the way that they're thinking, and it's affecting their moods and all the things.
Yeah.
So I love this. Okay, so then also we have this whole player of cortisol being probably more elevated than ever because we don't have the estrogen and progesterone on board to help temper the cortisol,
Yeah.
which is then contributing to things like sleep disruption,
Yes.
right?
More gut dysfunction.
More
And,
gut dysfunction.
and inhibiting our thyroid function. Yay.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. Such a great
Right?
recipe.
So it is, right? So the estrogen and progesterone really build our resilience.
Yeah.
And we take that for granted. You say it perfectly that you talk about skills that we should have had on board.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden at midlife, you're like, oh, no, this isn't a should have, this is have to.
Yeah.
Right? This is a skill I really have to put into practice because my resilience has changed.
Yeah.
So the biochemistry has changed, but I do have some control. So to your point, it's not just the biochemistry changes, it's over. No, this is a call to action that now you really have to dial in your lifestyle.
I so appreciate that you say that. Like, I was just talking about that with someone earlier today about how it's great that we're having all these conversations about menopause.
Right.
And there's also a dysfunction around it where I feel like people are almost using it as a diagnosis, right? Well, because I'm in menopause, I can't X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Or it's being sometimes even used as an identity. Like we're so attached to being in the idea of menopause, even though we don't like it, we're identifying with it so strongly. It's actually getting in the way of us making progress in the ways that we can.
Yeah.
And I also think when it comes to biochemistry, and this is what I so appreciate about what you do, is that, yes, absolutely what you just said. It is a call to take better care of yourself than perhaps you ever have,
100%.
right? At the very least, it's a call to start taking care of yourself if you never have, right? At the very least. But sometimes that feels so difficult without additional supports, right? And this is where the supplementation, the HRT, these other modalities can be really impactful. Certainly not my zone of genius, but out of curiosity, like what would you tell a listener in terms of, as we're talking about this disruption, we're talking about the estrogen departing, we're talking about the gut health being jacked up, cortisol rising. What are some of like the common supplemental supports that you are giving to clients in order to help them through this phase?
So first, I would say we always want to double down on the lifestyle first.
Yeah.
Right? So are you exercising? Are you taking a walk every day? We know that that's the most underprescribed antidepressant.
Yeah.
Moving your body. Are you eating adequate protein to make the neurotransmitters that help you have a good mood and a calm mind? Are you focused on your gut health so that you can absorb the nutrients to make the neurotransmitters to have a calm mind?
Yeah.
Are you sleeping enough so that everything that you're eating and all the movement you're doing is able to work properly, right? We have to do that. Are you taking deep breaths and having some stress management into your daily life? These are all important pieces.
But you know, there's women listening to this that are like, Laini, if I'm not sleeping, there's no way I can't take a deep breath. I can't eat well tomorrow because I'm just so reactive to everything around me.
Yes.
And so, because I'm 100% with you on the lifestyle piece, but sometimes I feel like the precursor almost has to be a little additional support.
Yeah.
In order to get us, I always call it I always say the difference between like therapy and coaching is that therapists help people to get on the trampoline of life and coaches help people to jump higher.
Yeah.
Right. But
that.
in this conversation, I think it's very similar. Sometimes like the supplements and the medical community is able to help us get on the trampoline.
Yes.
Right. And then the health coaches can help you take it a little bit further by helping you to deepen your self-care with your lifestyle.
Yes. So if we think about brain nutrients just in general, magnesium is a really big one.
Yeah.
So midlife women need to be supplementing with magnesium, probably across the board. We're all deficient, but that helps with our calmness. It helps us sleep better. There are a lot of calming herbs that can be really helpful. Passion flower, L-theanine, all of these different calming nutrients Sometimes adaptogens like rhodiola or ashwagandha can help with
Ashwagandha, yeah.
mood and calming down. Once again, the amino acids like tyrosine can help with a little energy and motivation in the morning. So there is a lot of things that you can do. And then even supplementing with probiotics to really support your microbiome,
Yeah.
right?
Will you speak a little bit,
3. Yeah.
just because you mentioned probiotics, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's one of those things where I feel like nobody did them for a long time because we didn't know
Right.
enough. And then everybody did them all, they're all
Yeah,
like everyone
totally.
was so probiotic. And then we moved into this phase of like, oh, probiotics aren't really doing much, right? But it really boils down to the type of probiotic you're
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
Will you just speak a little bit to that? Like if someone is going to try a probiotic, how
Mhm.
do they choose a quality product and what should they be looking
Yeah.
for?
So, as always, what is your goal? What are you looking for? That's really determinant because probiotics are different across the board.
Yeah.
So, when we're thinking about live strains like the ones that are most popular, like lactobacillus, bifidobacillus, those all have research that show they can help your mood, they can help with this, they can help with that, right? It totally works. You can take those probiotics to support whatever you're trying to improve in that moment.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is those probiotics go in, support your body, and then they leave. So they don't actually help diversify the gut microbiome,
Okay.
right? So if we want to have a healthy microbiome, we need to use a variety of probiotics. I personally like spore biotics because they go in and kind of reseed the garden. So when we have, a garden full of different strains of probiotics, they help everything else flourish. So then the overall picture is better as a whole.
Yeah.
So there's an argument or we could talk about both sides, sometimes even taking both depending on the situation. But just know they're a little bit different. They both have purposes. You can use one, either, or both together depending on what's happening.
Yeah. And probably in more extreme cases, right? Doing like a fecal test or something where people can really
Right.
see like what is actually missing from
Right.
their specific microbiome.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of strains specific for women, for vaginal health, those kind of things. So we might be taking two different kinds of support depending on what our goal is.
Yeah. So if there was a woman listening right now who is just like, okay, first of all, she tuned into this particular episode because she's like, I do not have emotional stability right now, and I am desperate for help. And she's listening to this conversation about the chemical side of it.
Mhm.
Like, what would be your like, where would you recommend someone starts? Like, if she's just like scrambling, she feels like she has no idea where to begin, especially with the chemical side of this, what would be like the ignition?
So I personally believe everybody should test, not guess, or work with a practitioner,
Totally.
right? So that's where I would start. Because we can talk about magnesium and omega-3s and vitamin D and probiotics and tyrosine and L-theanine and melatonin, and we can talk about these all day long. And yes, they all work. But what do you specifically need,
Yeah,
right?
like let's
What's
get there
really
faster.
happening?
Yeah.
What's really happening? And you've seen this too, and we call it that throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to thousands of women who are like, I tried that, it didn't help me sleep. I tried that, it didn't help me
Yeah.
sleep. I
All
tried
the
that, it
time.
didn't help me sleep. There's so much more to the picture. When we look at some in-depth blood chemistry, when we start assessing the lifestyle, when we look at how the digestive system is working, we can usually bring it down and say, okay, let's work on gut health, stress management, and add these supplements, right?
Yeah.
So we can do that, but you've got to really invest in figuring out what's the best strategy for yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like anything, right? I mean,
Right.
it's kind of, you can go broad, but also
Totally.
broad. And like you said, throwing
Mhm.
spaghetti at the wall, it kind of, some things might work, some things might stick, but it just takes you longer to get there. But when you
Yeah.
really work with a
Yeah.
practitioner, things start to accelerate quite quickly. On that note, I just want to
Mhm.
remind listeners that we have a coaching offer through Grace and Grit that is specifically for Laini and her services as a functional diagnostic practitioner. So she can help with the testing. And then also the package includes some consultations for like obviously what kind of supplements you would need, and then follow up in terms of how those things are working for you. So if someone's interested in finding out more about that, just head on over to graceandgrit.com. And if you just go to the programs tab of the website, you'll see the coaching option at the bottom, and we're both on that page. Just click on her services and you can read about it.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a really good piece of advice. And you're right, it's totally an investment.
It
right?
is.
Like we're not saying it's not an investment,
Mhm.
but think of all the things that we do, like the things we spend money
Mhm.
on in our life, like we take care of our cars, we take care of our homes, we invest in these things and because we want a certain outcome, right? We want to live in a clean space. We want to run a car that's reliable. And if we want to get to the root of these problems quicker, it makes a whole lot of sense that you invest with
And
somebody.
yeah, no, and on that same token, what I see often, you probably do as well, most of us think that going to our doctor is going to get us the help that we need.
Yeah.
And our physicians are there to help us, but they're doing the same thing. They're just seeing what will work. So I've worked with a lot of women who say, well, I've tried this antidepressant or this anti-anxiety or this sleep medication and I feel terrible,
Yeah.
or it's still not helping me. I still feel anxiety because medications don't work the same for every person either. So it really is. Do you want to keep taking chances of going to the doctor here and trying this here and doing this one because it was the latest Instagram, success of here's what you need to order, or really dive in and figure it out for yourself?
Yeah. Hopefully it's the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just to kind of recap that cascade, right? We have hormones dropping,
Mhm.
we have microbiome shifting, we have
Yeah.
cortisol rising, which then affects our sleep. And then if we all know what happens when sleep is not on par, right? When sleep is
Yeah.
suffering,
Yeah.
everything suffers,
Yeah.
right? And self-care gets very challenging to administer. So
Oh,
this is really the reason why I wanted to have this kind of biochemistry conversation going into this, because I think that as much as I believe in learning the skill sets of managing your mind, which I call parenting the brain,
yeah.
and learning how to befriend your emotions, it's very difficult to do that work when you're chemically reactive.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the chemistry is almost a precursor. At least they probably should be done side by side. Like I
Yeah.
think both camps of work are incredibly important, but sometimes we need a little bit of that chemical
Mhm.
support in order to get on the trampoline.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, to your point, that's what's so hard for women is they get caught in this cycle in midlife and they just feel like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What's wrong? Am I broken? You literally feel broken.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. I feel blah. I feel not like myself. What's wrong?
Yeah.
And the reality is things are shifting and changing. If you don't speak up and look for help or look for resources, you suffer in silence. And that's not what we want. That's why we're having these conversations to let you know you're not alone. This
Yeah.
happens to more women than you are even aware of.
Yeah.
And there's lots of options and lots of things you can do. And then circling back to what we talked about previously, as far as the lifestyle and this midlife calling us to take responsibility for our health,
Hugely.
100%. If we
Yeah.
were having this conversation with 32-year-olds, what would we be talking about for mood stability? You need to eat a well-balanced meal.
Put
You
yourself
need
to
to not
bed,
have a
right?
bunch of sugar and alcohol and bread, right? That's not going to help your mood. You need to go to
Yeah.
bed. You need to exercise.
Mhm.
And now in midlife, the chemistry matters, hormones matter, but so does the lifestyle.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that side of it. Like I always call it the self-leadership side, right? Because the
Yeah.
chemistry we don't always have control over.
Right?
Um, but the self-leadership side, we do. There's always something that we can do.
Yeah.
Even if it is just putting ourselves to bed 30 minutes earlier, right? Or eating one less cookie or drinking one more glass of water. There is always something that we can do. And I think that when we think about self-leadership and we think about emotional reactivity, part of we're contributing to our own suffering in a few ways. Number one, we're neglecting our own self-care,
Mhm.
right? And we'll get into that here in just a second. We're not parenting our brain, like I said earlier. And then we're also not feeling our emotions. We're numbing them, we're escaping them, we're doing everything and anything to avoid the hell out of them. And furthermore, we're making them mean really terrible things, which just generates more stress. So there is a lot that we are contributing to when it comes to emotional reactivity. So let's talk about that. Now that we've kind of like established that
Mhm.
absolutely biochemistry plays a role here, and anyone who tells you it doesn't, I think maybe needs to read some other books,
Right?
right? On that note, by the way,
Just
do you
like you.
have any great reads that you suggest? Like I'm thinking Estrogen Matters is probably a great book.
Mhm.
for women to check out. I don't know how much. I'm trying to think of the new menopause with Dr. Haber. I don't think she speaks a lot to emotions in that book, but I'm sure there is a little bit
There's
in
some good
there.
in there. There's a little bit everywhere. Even Mosconi is talking about
Yep,
how the brain is affected,
for
right? So
sure.
that's a good one.
Lisa Mosconi. Yep.
Uh-huh. Felice Gersh, if you follow her, she has some really great insight into, just how our mood and everything is affected. So there are a lot of great resources. We
Does
should
Gersh
probably
have a
listen
book?
to.
Do you know?
Not specifically. She has a smaller book that talks about menopause symptoms and what to
Okay.
be focused on, but not specifically on emotions.
Yeah. And Sarah Gottfried, I know too, like she has
She's
quite a
great.
bit. And,
Yeah.
I love her or hate her. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I think she says, like, I generally like her message. I think she
Yeah.
has a lot of great information. And sometimes I think she's going
Yeah.
off the deep end. But
There was just recently Dr. Jolene Brighton and Dr. Carrie
oh,
Jones had a
yeah.
podcast interview all about progesterone and GABA and minds and emotions. And that was pretty powerful.
Yeah,
Talking about
for
how
sure.
important that was. Yeah.
Because I think education is a big piece of this. I think that when we
Yeah.
can understand what is actually happening, it enables us to extend ourselves more compassion
Yeah.
and not make up all these stories in our head like I am broken or something is seriously wrong with me. We can really understand the chemistry that's behind it
Yeah.
and hopefully extend a lot more grace to ourselves.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the neglect of self-care, because I think that, of course, a lot of people roll into midlife and they are either not taking care of themselves because they're taking care of everyone else,
Yep.
or they're trying to take care of themselves like they did when they were 20 years old and wondering why it's not working. Right? So when we say take care of yourselves, like administer self-care, it really means meeting yourself where you're at
Yeah.
and truly checking in with your current resource availability. Like, how many resources do I actually have on board to improve my diet,
Yeah.
to take on exercise? Because you can always do something,
Mhm.
but can you do the hardest workout on the planet, or should you be doing that workout? I would say probably not. If you're not sleeping and you feel really emotionally reactive,
Yeah.
that may not be the best plan. Yeah.
No.
So
No.
we spoke earlier too, inadequate sleep disrupts
Mhm.
our cortisol rhythms and hormone production.
Yep.
So definitely doing what you can to help yourself with the sleep cycle. I know we're going to sound like a broken record here because I feel like we go through these things every time you and I talk, but I think that it's just so important. Sleep matters. And a lot of
does.
women don't have routines around sleep, or they're constantly compromising their bedtime, which leads to a lot more chemical disruption the next day. Skipping meals or not giving yourself proper nutrition can definitely hijack your hormones. And it hugely affects insulin regulation, right? Which affects everything else in the body.
Yes.
So definitely making time to eat throughout the day, and also making sure you have well-balanced plates. I know I'm not telling listeners anything they don't know right now. A lack of movement can create hormonal sensitivity and make us
Yeah.
more emotionally reactive. I will say, I will go through periods, especially in this whole book writing process, where I was sitting for long periods of time. And after a few days, I would just be like, why do I feel so bad?
Yeah.
Like, I would never say I've experienced depression the way a lot of people have, but the closest I have been to it is probably in those periods where I was incredibly immobile.
Yeah.
And I just felt like a caged animal. So definitely movement can help our moods significantly. And just reminding listeners that chronic stress is not your friend,
No.
especially with emotional volatility, because we up our cortisol production even more, then we struggle with sleep even more, and then we neglect self-care even more, and it just creates this terrible cascade of negative consequences.
Yes. Oh my gosh. All of those things, they can't even say it enough. It is so important. And I love that you always say parenting yourself,
Yeah.
because bringing that example up when a 6-year-old is having a panic attack or flailing or really angry, what are the strategies we use? Go lay down, go
Yeah.
sit down, go for a walk, breathe through your nose. Let's get you something to eat.
Yeah.
Why are we not doing that for ourselves?
Totally. And the other thing too is I think something that I'm understanding more and more all the time is that those chronically elevated periods of stress, and some people just making it a habit, right? Some people are living
Yeah.
Like they literally have made a habit out of stress. They have lived so stressed out for so long, they don't even know what the other side feels like.
Yeah.
Like they literally feel normal. They would say, I'm not stressed out.
Mhm.
But then once they taste the other side, they're like, oh, now I know what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
But the other piece of it that I was trying to get to is just the nervous system,
Mhm.
right? That when we're in a chronic state of stress, we really dysregulate the nervous system. So we're not oscillating between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, which
Yeah.
also hijacks the brain. So
And
you
the
don't do your
digestive
best
system.
thinking. In
Yeah.
what?
And the digestive
Oh, for
system.
sure. Your
Yeah.
digestive system, all your organs, all your
Yeah.
systems. But when we're talking about parenting yourself mentally, it's almost impossible to do. I don't want to say impossible. It's very hard to do when you're in a state of fight or flight all the time,
Yeah.
right? We have to be able to access our prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is not fully online when we're in a state of fight or flight. So it is important that we are starting at midlife, if we haven't already had a practice of this, of learning how to pollinate moments in our day that help us to dip into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. Like, what are the things in the day that help you to feel restored? Like, what are some of your go-tos?
Going for a walk, number
For
one.
sure.
And then to your point, so when I sit at the desk and I'm online for a long time, I actually ache. I actually have more low
Yeah.
back pain,
Yeah.
all of those things. So getting up and going for a walk, going into the kitchen and actually, cooking and meal prepping, I actually like that because I get lost in it.
Yeah.
And then I love music. Put the freaking music on, have a dance party in the kitchen. Like we forget that we used to do that all the time as a teenager and as in our 20s, that we always had music on to lift our mood.
Yeah.
And then we go through our day going, why am I so grumpy? Turn the music on, right? So I
So
collect
true.
records. So I've been like trying to put on a record every evening and meal prep and sing, 80s songs to records, and then hope it doesn't skip,
I
Well, that
know.
stresses me out. Oh, crap. Finding time for exercise every day, just those
Yeah.
basic things, but giving myself permission to take a break. Because the reality is when I sit down and eat my lunch, it's amazing that I really only spend less than 15 minutes and I feel completely refreshed.
Yeah.
Rather
I
than working through the lunch hour, trying to get everything done and feeling discombobulated and trying to multitask and not doing any of it well.
yeah. I love that the first thing you mentioned was walking, and especially
Mhm.
walking outside, because
Yes.
Silka and I just did an interview 2 weeks ago for the podcast. It was the last episode. So if someone wants to go back and listen to it, you certainly can. But we were talking about nature therapy and how I don't know that there's anything that restores me as quickly in terms of my nervous system as nature does. Like nature
Mhm.
is so good at that. Um, I was sharing with a client the other day. I read an article a while back. I don't remember where it was, and I should have taken better note of it. But it was talking about how, like, even birds chirping is very soothing to the nervous system because think about it, birds only chirp when they're safe,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah,
they make their pretty songs and they have different
totally.
chirps probably when they're in distress.
Yeah.
But the bird chirping that we love so much is usually because they're relaxed,
Yeah.
right? And so when we hear that, there's the co-regulation that we too feel relaxed.
Mhm.
And then there's, chemicals that are emitted from trees that help our immune system, the sunlight in our eyes, the groundedness under our feet. Like, I just think that if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of helping to regulate your nervous system, spend more time in nature.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And just a thought on that same token.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed this, that they've, outlawed incandescent light bulbs in our homes.
Oh,
Does anybody
yeah.
know that? So when we're inside, we're not even getting a natural spectrum of light at all.
Yeah. It's crazy.
LED lights are
I
not great for your
hate
health.
LED lights
And that's all you can't even buy an incandescent bulb for your house. So when you think about that, you have to, for your health, get outside and get full spectrum light from the sun.
Yeah.
And when it's nice or when it starts to be nice, I literally go outside and sit in the sun for 3 to 5 minutes and
Yeah.
recharge because
Yeah.
we really are charged by the sun. So taking that time to get outside is super important. It does so much for our mood and emotions.
Yeah. And I love that just the term of the junk light, like, because that's really what indoor
Yes.
light is. It's like junk
Yes.
food.
It
It's
is.
not giving your body the lighting it needs to generate all the chemistry and all the beautiful things that it does inside of our bodies. So I think it's a really important note. Um, So the second thing that I wanted to talk about was this whole parenting your brain piece, because this is, of course, a big part of the work that I do with my clients. And I'm curious to know, like, when you're working with clients, what are some of what I call thought errors that you often hear, like ways of thinking that you know is causing unnecessary suffering in that person?
What I see the most are women that don't think anything can get done without them.
Yeah,
If I
right,
don't do it, it'll never get done. If I don't
right.
do it today, the whole world will fall apart.
Yeah,
If I don't keep moving, I'll die. I have to stay in motion. I have to do the things. It has to be perfect. It has to be done today. This whole fallacy of perfection, doing it now, and forgetting, we talked about this last time, Courtney, C's get degrees.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't have to do the dishes every night. You don't have to have laundry done on a specific day every week. You can choose to take a break. You can choose to delegate. You can choose to have a date night or get a sitter for the kids. There are things you can choose to do to change your schedule so that it's not always this go, 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 go.
yeah,
But you have to parent your brain and make that a priority and put it in your schedule to do that.
yeah,
And we get so caught in that cycle that it really does take sitting down and being intentional to plan
yeah.
those moments of self-care.
Absolutely. I have a laundry list of thought errors that I hear, and I've talked about them a lot on the show, so I won't go too deep into it here. But one that I do want to mention here, because it's probably one that I don't talk about as much, but I think it is so powerful, is women saying, if I'm nice to myself or I accept where I am right now, it means I'm never going to change. Right? Like, what? Like, that is not how behavior change works. You're
No.
actually creating such a bigger roadblock by being a jerk to yourself. But just that belief that I can't be nice to myself if I respect myself, if I'm compassionate to myself, I'll just get complacent. Well, maybe you should try it and see if that's true, because
Yeah.
I have yet to see that that's true.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole litany, right, of like exactly what you said, that things can't get done without me. I have too much to do. There's never enough time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm always going to be X, Y, and Z. This is just who I am.
Totally.
I mean, there are so many thoughts that generate, again, not only roadblocks, but also generate a lot more unnecessary stress, which of
Yeah.
course is only further disrupting our chemistry. So your brain does not know the difference between real and imagined stress.
Mhm.
And man, are we awesome at conjuring up a lot of unnecessary stress in the brain. And then the body just perceives that like all other stress. And so we set off the same cascade of hormonal chaos. We send our blood sugar through the roof. We can't access our prefrontal cortex. Like, there's so much fallout from not thinking in a way that is useful to you. And I want to repeat that, because that is everything. We're not saying think positive. I'm saying think in ways that are useful to you. So if you wake up tomorrow morning and you had a really terrible night of sleep, and you have exercise first thing in the morning, and you just tell yourself you're such a loser, you're never going to be healthy, life is always going to be so hard, right? That is not useful to you. But talking to yourself in a way that, hey, girl, I see you. Like, that sucks that you had a bad night's sleep, right? Again, here we are again. And maybe what self-care looks like today is just going for a walk this morning rather than doing the extreme thing that you had planned. And we're just going to call that good for today. That is useful, because it gets you out of the all or nothing frame of mind, and it gets you into what I can do, even though all this other stuff is also true. So parenting the brain, a very big deal, because I truly believe the way that you think about the midlife transition, the way you think about the work that the midlife transition is calling you into, because it's calling us all into
Yes.
work. And the way we think about those things has everything to do with whether we will show up or not. So just keep checking the tape that's playing in your head. And here's a great way to check the tape that's playing in your head. When you are not doing the things that you say you will do for yourself, when you are not keeping the promises that you make to yourself, it's time to check the tape in your brain. If you are, in lieu of this conversation of emotions, if you are feeling super anxious, super stressed, super angry, how might you be contributing to that through the way that you're thinking? Right? Because when
Yeah.
I'm pissed, I'm thinking like, he's just an asshole.
Totally.
Right? Like that's the thought. And then it's like, okay, well, how is that useful to me? It's
Right.
not. Right?
Yeah.
So when I call myself out on that, it's like, okay, well, how else could I think about this that at least helps me out a little bit? Okay, this guy's probably having a bad day. He's not doing his best right now. And I'm just going to pivot into something else.
Yeah.
But me focusing on that one thought is only going to generate more anger. So as much as chemistry feeds into our emotions, we are generating a lot of emotions all the time by the tape that's playing in our head.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
As you were talking, I was just thinking of Dr. Amen, who talks about brain health all the time. And
Yeah.
he said the brain has to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And he says, really, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should say is, today's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
And turns your brain on to having a good day.
Yes.
Because if you let it run wherever it wants to run, that's where it will go. But you have more power over how your brain reacts and how you think and how you feel than we realize. We really, really do. And, this is such an important conversation, and not to negate the value of hormones or those kind of things.
Sure.
Invest in those. And yes, without a doubt, hormone replacement therapy can be very helpful.
Yeah.
But it is the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
All the hormone replacement in the world is not going to work if your diet's not good, if you're not sleeping, if you're thinking terrible thoughts about yourself, if, all of the things. So it's just a whole cake.
Well, it's kind of like when you're only taking supplements, but you're not taking responsibility for the lifestyle habits,
Totally.
like parenting your brain and befriending emotions.
Yeah.
I've always heard that analogy that I love so much. It's like mowing your lawn while your house is on fire. Like the supplements are mowing the lawn. Like the lawn might look nice, but you're burning your house down because you're right. Like you're not taking care of the things that you can take care of. So it's both and. We want to mow the lawn and we want to have the house that's not burning.
Yes. I just thought of one, Courtney, because you're like check in with your emotions. And I was just thinking, we take all of these things together to make a cake, this beautiful cake. You need all the ingredients.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're making a cake? Do you ever test it? Do you ever taste test to make sure the batter's good? That's like checking in with your emotions.
Yeah.
Take a minute to check in. What is this emotion? What am I feeling? Is this good or bad? Do I need to add something? Do I need to take something away?
Yeah.
You're in the process of building something. Check in. It's okay to feel them. It's okay to acknowledge them. But then, as you said, what's the emotion that's going to help me? What thinking pattern is going to help move me forward to continue this in a positive way?
Yeah. And one thing I want to offer listeners, because this was so powerful for me, is that because I think a lot of us fear our emotions. Like we like the happy and the joy and those things, but we fear the other side so much, the sadness, the grief, the fear, the self-doubt, that we spend a lot of our life running from those things to the point. And I truly believe that when you're not able to feel the hard stuff, you'll never feel the height of the good stuff. When you numb one emotion, you numb all emotion.
Yeah.
Like you become really awesome at generally not feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to open ourselves to the full spectrum of human emotion. And that's hard to do when you've spent the bulk of your life kind of running from things. So the thing that really helped me is that emotions are a sign of aliveness.
Oh, yes.
Right? Emotions are energy. Emotions are intel. Emotions are messengers about what's going on in your life, how you're interpreting your life, where you might need a little extra support. And when we shut out the messenger, we can't use the intel.
Yeah.
Right? And we're the person who's suffering for that. No one else. Well, that's not true. I think my husband suffers when right? Like I definitely think people around me suffer when I'm not taking responsibility for my emotional landscape. Right. But I just want to offer here, when I say that phrase, befriend emotions, I just mean that number one, what you said is perfect because it's exactly where I encourage my clients to start, which is just the naming and noticing. Yeah. What am I feeling? Don't judge it. Don't fix it. Just name it. And a lot of people can't even do that because they haven't been naming emotions for most of their life. Mm-hmm. So can you describe it? Can you describe what you're feeling? Can you allow yourself to feel it for a few minutes? Where in your body is it? Like just get curious about it. And I always tell my clients, it's kind of like someone knocking on the door. And instead of like slamming the door in their face, you invite them in and you allow them a seat at the table. And that's all we're asking you to do with emotion is just start to be curious. Like, oh, why are you here? Why are you here today? Is it because I didn't sleep last night?
Yeah.
Is it because this topic or this thing that's happening is really important to me and I don't like the way that it's going? Right? We don't always have to spin ourselves out of difficult emotion, but we do need to be curious about why it's there in the first place.
Yes.
And I think that the more we show curiosity, the less we fear the emotion, right? We greet the emotion with curiosity, and over time, we stop fearing it so much. And when you stop fearing emotion, you start living your life full out.
Amen.
Because think about this. Like, what would be different for you if there was no emotion that you feared? Well, how would your life be different? What would you go after? Like, what conversations would you have?
Everything.
Right?
I would do
Everything.
everything. Yeah. There's no fear attached to it. Yeah.
So it's, yes, there is a chemical side to emotional disruption at midlife, but man, emotions are also just like this magic potion. And if we can learn how to like befriend them and better yet, generate them, because that we have that power. We can generate our own emotional landscape by the way that we think, by the way that we take care of ourselves. And that is true personal power in my book. Like that is power when you can generate that kind of energy.
Yeah.
So let's do more of that. And hopefully this podcast episode today gave people some avenues for doing that. I'm just peeking at my notes here to see if there's anything else. Well, strategies, let's kind of finish with that really quickly. We talked about the supplemental support. We talked about working with someone to help you sort that out. Certainly HRT is an option for some people that is going to offer some softening of maybe the emotions that people are experiencing. And then we also just talked about these last 3 layers, like definitely the lifestyle behavior changes, taking like not neglecting your self-care, but really going all in at this stage of life. And then really learning how to manage your thinking and how to manage your emotions. And if anyone is listening to this, especially this second half of this podcast where we're talking about the self-leadership piece of emotions, this is the masterclass that we're teaching next month inside of Rumble and Rise, which people can purchase even if you're not a Rumble and Rise member. If you go to graceandgrit.com and you go to the programs tab, you'll see masterclasses and you can just click. There's a whole slew of masterclasses you can purchase. But the one that I'm teaching in April is basically emotional wellness essentials. And it's a class that I taught last year, but I'll be teaching it again live this year. And you can also find it by just going to graceandgrit.com/masterclasses, and it'll take you right there. But it's a $29 investment, and it will give you a lifetime of benefit. Because I think these skills have changed my life more than any other thing that I've done for my health and well-being, because it finally gave, number one, I stopped being so afraid of my emotions. I got to ditch my anger because I wasn't so afraid to feel other things, which solved a lot of problems. And life just got bigger because I wasn't afraid to go after things. And not saying that I'm not afraid of certain emotions. Of course, we all are. But at least I know what's happening now, and I have more tools on board to help me work through that. So if you are looking for a little help with that, consider joining us next month. And I think that's it. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, I think this is just really powerful because as women, we forget to share our emotions, to experience them, to become friends with them. Because when we do, we get to know ourselves a lot better.
Yeah.
And once again, that's this call of midlife. This is the call. Everything is shifting, and you get to choose what you want to turn into. Right? You get to choose which path we're going to take, how emotionally well we're going to be moving into that next chapter. It's pretty exciting. So just shift your thinking.
Yeah.
And this is awesome. We have so many great tools for you. And if you're in this community, you are lucky. Courtney is one of the most brilliant minds I know.
Oh, stop it.
No, you stop it. Anyway, but these kinds of classes are so important. So don't miss this opportunity, because this is a powerful piece that all of us need.
Yeah. And I think I would just close by saying, stop apologizing for your emotions too, right? Women do that all the time, especially with tears. I'm so sorry I'm crying. Why?
Yeah.
You're feeling something. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You're
I
having a
just
sign of life right now. That's great.
Yeah, I had this conversation with a friend just a couple days ago,
Yeah.
who lost a son.
Yeah.
And grief is strange, ladies,
Yeah.
and we all have grief in midlife. There's lots of things that could come up. And she says it just comes out of nowhere. And I said, yeah, you're supposed to express it, right? And we have to not be afraid to express it in front of our friends and in front of other people.
Yeah.
That's an invitation for them to be able to get more close to emotions as well.
It's true because we're showing people who we really are. Like, this is my
When we
truth right
Yeah,
now. I'm really sad.
yeah, and
Can you
that's
hold space
great.
for me in that? Yeah.
But if we always fake it and hold it in, then we're
Totally.
not allowing other people to be true to themselves either.
It's so true,
So
Laini.
it's very
So true.
important.
All right, my friend. Well, I always appreciate these conversations. Hopefully, listeners will get a lot out of this, and I will see you very soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.